One of the big guests on the NDTV network this year is Mr. Peter Voser of ABB. I have written this down. He's a Swiss national but calls himself foremost a global businessman. And therefore, this is the best stage to talk to somebody with that mindset. Mr. Voser, thanks indeed for taking the time out and speaking to us here at NDTV Profit.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tell us, at the start of calendar year 24, in a world which is looking fragmented, we calling this the opposite of globalization, which is globalization in some sense. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about business momentum and business confidence as you look ahead for 2024, or albeit the next 2-3 years?
I think during 2023, we all experienced that we did forecast a slowdown, but it actually never happened in a big way. So we have learned out of that. I think we are carefully still optimistic for 24. I think we are looking at two different halves. I think the first half will be more challenged than the second. And I think you need to take a regional lens as well. I think the US, India, Asia except China, I think will actually just grow in the normal way, which means strong growth. Europe is lagging, has structural issues, has also had to deal with the pandemic, the wars, high energy prices, cost inflation on wages, etc. So will be slower. And China, I would also say they will most probably recover towards the second half of the year because they have some consumption issues which they need to sort out. So I think personally I'm a half glass full person anyway, and I don't see any other thing for 24 than that.
Okay, and the glass getting filled will probably happen in the second half of the calendar.
Yes, I would say so, yes. It's more, because you see during 2023 we experienced that what we call the short cycle products and orders, they were starting to slow down. At the same time, the late cycle big project business started to come in. So the order books and the revenue books were still actually quite well developed. But I think in the first half of next year, you will see the larger projects slowing down, and most probably the short cycle business will come up at a little bit later in the year, towards the end of second quarter, but normally third and fourth quarter.
Okay. It's also a year wherein, or maybe not just the year, but maybe many years of higher than the past 15 years of interest rates being there. So higher for longer, but in a calendar year where we'll see interest rates possibly come lower. How do you think the world adjusts to, or how do you think corporates like yourself adjust to higher rates, different IRRs projects, different multiples as well, discounting for various assets including equity or acquisitions? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I think over the last 4 years, ABB has transformed, and we have actually performed very well, including our India business, and we achieved our financial targets a year earlier than expected. That means we go into this interesting period, 24-25, with a strong balance sheet, a well-performing business, and that gives us the opportunities. So I think we are facing clearly a business environment where generations have never lived through high interest rates, have never lived through inflation. And I think, therefore, companies need to prepare themselves. These are different risks which we now have to manage. We have to educate the middle management who, for the first time, have to deal with these issues. Now, on the other side, there's a huge opportunity. Given the strengths we have in the company, we hopefully can take advantage of lower multiples. Because lower multiples means you can also do acquisitions, strengthen your businesses, your divisions which we have, and we will be watching for that. It may take a few months more before the multiples really come down. Now, in terms of interest rates, that's where I'm most probably a little bit more conservative. I don't see that many interest rate changes in 24. I think even the US most probably will be very careful, given that the US economy is still growing, so that the inflation is not yet at the level where it should be. So therefore, I think it's also towards the latter part of the year where we will see that. I don't think Europe will actually see interest rate reductions in 2024. That's 25.
Wow, and hence what you said becomes even more interesting, Mr. Voser, because yesterday, for example, we were talking to the PwC chairperson who was saying that in a clutch of the global CEO survey that they did, there are a plethora of companies and CEOs who've never seen high interest rates and will find it very difficult to navigate. So my question is maybe not for ABB, because you guys have been there, seen that, done that all, but for a lot of your clients as well, do you expect quote-unquote challenging times because of unprecedented economic factors surrounding them?
Yeah, I would agree to that, and that needs to be managed, and that's why also I said that I see the larger projects coming down in 24, because I think some of the companies will really maybe review their capital expenditure because of the increased cost if you have to finance that through debts. And I think this will play out in 24. On the other side, we have come out of COVID. Actually, the economy was booming the last 2-3 years. And in some parts of the world, as I said at the beginning, we don't see the big effect there yet. And therefore, I think there will be also a compensating effect. But there is no doubt that some customers will struggle with the higher costs for debt, increased wage costs, their margins are coming down, and normally one of the first things companies do is actually to slow down capital expenditure, and that indirectly then we will actually feel. And that's why this crossover of short cycle orders and the large projects is very important, and that when that comes, I think I sleep better than when I see that the short cycles are coming up again.
Do other nuances come into play here? There's a lot of talk in this at the WEF as well about AI predominantly. Yes, sustainability, yes, merger cooperation, etc., rebuilding trust. But AI seems to be finding its way into every conversation. I would love to think of how you, as leading such a large company, think about AI and whether it is disruptive or whether it's actually a transformative technology, if you will, for the world at large and for corporates over the course of the next few years?
It's a transformation. It is all about capturing a market which is there. AI, together with digitalization, will actually allow companies to automate their manufacturing installation in a very different way. Therefore, the productivity gains and what comes out of AI in terms of business opportunities will, in my opinion, be very significant and will be needed to stay competitive for companies. Now, in the case of ABB, we obviously have both sides. So we use AI internally for our back office, customer service centers, but also for our manufacturing. But at the same time, we are running roughly 120 pilot projects for customers in order to help them actually through our robotics, our automation, our electrification products to take full advantage of AI. Now, the B2B space is not the B2C space. So it will take time because it is attached to infrastructure investments. It's attached to new manufacturing investments. So it will take time. And the companies are not yet ready. They are still digesting the digitalization. And quite clearly, to apply AI in the right way, you need to have your data cleaned.
Right.
You need to have all the process steps you have to have clear in order to apply AI. So this will take a little bit more time. And I think also in the survey of PwC, most CEOs actually, they claim that they're already ready for AI. I will put an enormous question mark behind that because I think the full scale of that we don't know yet, and a lot of cleanup needs to happen still on the data side. Because as you know, if you have data, you will get AI out of data which are not prepared for this, then you may get the wrong result out of it, and that's what you can't have, because we are not in the consumer business, where you just bring out a new update of your mobile phone software. We supply manufacturing places, and they can't just change overnight things because they're producing cars or they're producing iPhones as well, etc. So this needs to work. We can't afford just sending you overnight an update and it all runs again. So the B2C and B2B is very different there. So.
Point well noted. The other aspect that I wanted to talk to you about is this article that you wrote on 18th December, if I'm not wrong, wherein you said that the regionalization of supply chains is likely to reach a milestone in 2024 as more and more companies make the move to multi-source and regionalize their supply chains. Now, I would love to understand how you think about this, because the earlier belief, or maybe the current belief was or is also that due to costs and due to maybe diversifying the supply sources, in some sense supply chain would and should move eastwards for the cost factor, and by virtue of the China plus one or the Europe plus one theory as well, a lot of Southeast Asian nations, LATAM nations maybe, are likely to see more emphasis on producing onshore in those regions. Can you talk to us a bit about how do you see about this process, both from an ABB angle and from the world at large?
Okay. Maybe let's start with the second one, so how I see the industry. Because one of the big factors is that the consumer is changing. And here, I think supply chain and sustainability comes together. You have a consumer today, specifically the younger generations, they want to know what's the CO2 footprint of my product I buy. So they want to have much more regionalized, localized supply chains in order to actually buy products which are more climate friendly. So that's actually a market push which we need to take into account. On the other side, you have a resilience push which has its origin also in the pandemic, but it actually started earlier, which is a dependency on one country or one global manufacturing place. I think that's history. Companies today, when they look at their risk matrix, they will put 5, 6 factories in place, smaller capacity instead of one big one. And that will be to the benefit of Asia, some of it, to the benefit of India, some of it, but also Europe, or through the IRA, for example, also the US, or in the Green Deal in Europe. So I think you will see the benefit of the supply chain coming to the various regions in different ways. Now, that's the industry view I have. Now, you could argue this is inflationary, because you have smaller batches, you transfer it around. And that's where automation, that's where robotics, and that's where AI comes into the game. That gives you the productivity gains that you actually, in a high labor cost country like Switzerland, Germany, Austria, so in Europe, you can produce because you are not producing that much with labor. You're producing with automation, with robotics. And I think that productivity gain at lower costs will make it competitive versus Asia, etc. Now, Asia has one advantage, because if you look at the GDP growth over the next 10, 15 years, where is the world GDP growth going to come from? Yeah. It's Asia. So therefore, I think if Asia just concentrates on their demand and their manufacturing capacity in Asia for that demand, I think you have significant growth. Given that China plus one comes into the game also for ASEAN countries, for example, for India, etc., you will see the manufacturing capacity in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Indonesia, the Philippines, in India will actually grow. Now, this will not come overnight, because this will take a few years to install all of this. Now, ABB, we run a different supply chain structure. We are already today, not because of the last 3 years, but because of decisions 20 years ago, we run local, regional supply chains. So what we produce in a country, we sell in a country, or the other way around. If we sell in a country, in China, for example, 85% is produced in China. So we are less dependent on now restructuring our supply chain, because it is already local and regionalized in that sense. That makes us gives us a small advantage which we have, and we need to drive this. I think this is a golden opportunity for India, but India not for mass production. It's actually high-tech quality, where you combine the new elements available, technology, robots, with the huge knowledge base you have in India. Young population, well-educated. I think this is made for really for capturing a lot of the manufacturing capacity which you need for India, and most probably also for export.
You think India has taken some steps towards this what I mean to ask is, let's assume that the knowledge base was always there. What was needed was maybe some policies, maybe global cooperation, maybe the right geopolitical moves. You think India as a nation has taken some of those steps, or some need to be taken as yet?
This is my personal view. If you look at the last few years in terms of reforms, of institutional changes which the current government under the leadership of Modi has done, I think you can't reverse them. They are there. And I think this makes a big difference, because doing business in India today is very different. I think also the society feels that the way they have a digitalized ID now, how they can participate in the economy, I think this will not go away. This is there. Now, if you then, so that was always a problem in the past. You had the people, you had the capacity, but you didn't have the infrastructure, the institutions around it to drive this. Now, I don't think India will make the mistake that they want to compete against China in what I call the lower quality manufacturing, because China is very good in that. I don't think India should compete on that, but India can compete on the higher end of the scale, using the latest technologies from robotics, automation, and through that actually, with the help of the government, drive the changes in the infrastructure for climate change, new energy system, etc. So I think this is there to stay, so I'm very positive. And over the last 25 years, I think I've seen everything in India, going up and down and backwards and forwards, but I'm very optimistic. I was 3 times in India with the boards I'm on last year in 23, and we came away very positive that this train has left the station. So.
Well, your India team is doing fabulously well. The quarterly results, every single time that I look them, there is something, a surprise element, a positive surprise element that comes about. So kudos on that as well. My one final question really, and that is on, as you look forth to this decade, what amongst the newer, again, for lack of a better word, themes or topics interest you the most, or do you think will make the biggest difference? It could be AI, it could be sustainability, it could be electrification, it could be digitalization, or a combination of these. But which, to your mind, from a corporate perspective, not from a consumer perspective, will have the most telling impact on the way corporates do business and on the way business would happen per se across the world?
We positioned ABB in the 2 big revolutions which are ongoing in the world. One is building the new energy system, which is electrification. And the other one is automation and robotics, which we will need. We have demographic issues. Quite clearly, we have the supply chain changes, etc. So we position the company in those 2. And these are the big game changers for us and has the potential. Now, in order to capture that potential, it needs to be done in a sustainable way. Your purpose needs to drive you to generate a better world for the future, to help your customers to save CO2 by energy efficient products from ABB. So that's something which straddles across both. AI is exactly the same. That's a technology which you will apply in the 2 businesses, and therefore you will deliver productivity gains to yourself, but also to your customers. But the fundamental thing is to be positioned in those 2 big markets, which will allow you to take the benefits of what sustainability and also what AI and any future technology will bring. And for that, we have now worked 4 or 5 years to get the portfolio right, and I think we are well positioned. So it's all about us now, is you cannot finger point to anybody else there. And thank you for the words on ABB India. I think ABB India, the team under Sanjiv's leadership, they're doing a fantastic job, growing, good margins, so I'm very proud to have them in the portfolio.
Yeah, as you should be. I mean, they're doing wonderful, but they have a great parent as well, with such a strong culture and branding that I'm sure it helps them. But Mr. Peter Voser, thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us at the WEF, and have a great remainder of this World Economic Forum.
Thank you very much, and I wish you the same, and I hope you get used to the cold.
Cross fingers for that, all 20 of them.
Okay.
And viewers, thanks so much for tuning in.